Micromanaging stifles creativity. Empowering people creates creativity. That's where it thrives, because you're allowing people to make decisions and to do things with their own skills, their own knowledge, their own abilities.
This is the first time that I've ever had a returning guest on the Manager's Mag podcast. And I couldn't think of anyone better than you, Oak. And I'm super happy it's you. What I want to do, because I treat every episode as if it's its own thing, somebody's here for the first time. Some people obviously will probably know who you are. So let's do that whole quick introduction thing about why you, that proof statements. And let's talk about what you've done recently. And then we'll get into the heart, because I have some questions here about trying to find that right candidate pick and just have that conversation, if that's fair.
Thanks for having me back on the show. I enjoyed the first one, and when you asked me to come back, I was like, absolutely, I'd love to. I grew up in Northern Illinois, small little farm town. Played baseball, basketball, football all through school, and then went off to the United States Military Academy at West Point, did 2 years there. Then I came home and finished up in Army ROTC, did 2 years there, got my commission, did 23 years in the Army as a combat arms officer. My last assignment in the Army, I ran an Army ROTC program at the University of South Alabama, really involved in helping to create that next generation of leaders for the Army and for the nation. And then I ran a food bank for a couple of years after I retired. And then right there in Mobile, Alabama, covered 52 counties across the Gulf Coast, 3 states, whole Gulf Coast of Mississippi, whole Gulf Coast of Alabama, and about a third of the Panhandle of Florida. Did amazing work there. And then I did recruiting for Army ROTC for a while here in Daytona as a Department of the Army civilian, and wrote my book in February, published it in February 2021. And since then, I've been out on speaking engagements and doing leadership development programs for companies.
So you got to talk about what you recently accomplished. We talked on the phone about your most recent event you did, which I thought was pretty cool. If you don't mind sharing, and then we'll get into the heart of the core content. You got to talk about that. Come on.
No, it was an awesome event. It was called CloudCon 2025 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it was a cybersecurity IT conference. If you had told me 5 years ago that I'd talk to a cybersecurity conference, I would have laughed at you. But my message was very well received, and we figured out that we had a whole lot in common in what leadership is and why it's important. And it was at a minor league baseball park there in Grand Rapids. The first base dugout was the stage. I was up on the first base dugout, and there were about 700 people there, and they're sitting all in the stands there on the first base dugout side of the ballpark. And then my slides were up on the Jumbotron back behind me. I got to tell you, it was 90 degrees standing up on that dugout in the sun with no shade. I like hot weather. Heat doesn't bother me. That was hot. I gave the opening keynote talk there. Then I did a breakout session on my success talk. And then the next morning at breakfast, I did about a 45-minute question and answer period where they could ask me questions about anything they wanted. And I love those.
That's such a cool story. I wanted to highlight that because I think it's important to highlight people's successes, which I think is a fundamental thing. I want to talk about in this episode with you, because you're very qualified to do it. In our last episode, if I remember correctly, I think you commissioned just 600 people in the military. That's it. Yeah. What a small number. No, I said that sarcastic. I hope that didn't come across rude, Oak.
No, not at all.
So what I want to talk about is and I was talking about this with another gentleman earlier today. It's so hard to raise key traits, like what you look for. I'll give you an example. When I worked at one industry, we had to do like interview training, and there were certain things you couldn't do. You couldn't ask certain questions. Is there anything in your background that would come up? I remember I was doing an interview and I had asked someone, is there anything in your background? And he goes, yeah, I did second-degree murder. He said that like black and white in the interview with me. And when we did interview training, Oak, the goal was you can't cross certain lines. You can only listen. So my response had to be like, cool. That's all I could say. Couldn't ask why. Couldn't do anything. Now, That's an exaggerated example, obviously. I start with that story to give us a launching platform to say, outside of that exaggerated story, what are some things you look for in responses? Key things people say, key things people are in conversation. Right away, you can spot somebody's ability to be that soldier you're looking for, who has that strength to win. Let's talk about from that frame first, if that's clear.
I don't think there's a difference between looking for that soldier and looking for a great employee in the civilian world. I think good people are good people, and you got to be able to figure out who's a good fit for your organization, whichever whatever that is. I hired people at the food bank. I fired and hired some people and used the same principles hiring people at the food bank as I did as trying to find the right people to commission into the army.
Right.
I think that one of the things that you described is very important in that it needs to be conversational and you need to let them do most of the talking. I'm a firm believer, at least the first interview, and I don't think you should hire anybody short of 3 interviews. The first interview should be more than one person interviewing. It should be probably at least 3. So you get different perspectives. Something I look for may not be something you look for, and something that the next guy looks for might not be. It might be something different than all 3 of us, and all of them are important. You do that, and you ask open-ended questions, and you let them do most of the talking. I think that's important because then you're going to find those people who are self-centered versus servant centered. You'll find people who are egotistical, and I got it. I mean, you're at an interview. You want to put your best foot forward, but there's plenty of good ways to do that without making it all about you. The key to that for the people doing the interview is that you have to have done a little bit of your homework ahead of time. Most people don't want to do that. But look at the jobs they've had. You probably got the reviews that they had. Some companies require that when people are interviewing. Probably got a list of references, and I would have called a 1 or 2 of those references. And one of the things that's a red flag for me, especially if it's the last job that they
Right.
were on, if somebody in that company is not a reference for this job that you're applying for. Obviously, there's something wrong there. I'm not saying that it's your fault. I don't know the story, but there's something there that's a red flag if you can't find somebody in the company that you just left that's willing to give you a reference. And it doesn't
Okay.
have to be the boss, but somebody there. The key is you got to let them talk and open-ended questions that guide the conversation to the values that you're looking for. I'm a firm believer that you hire people for character and values, a little bit for skill. I got it, and especially depending on what the profession is, sometimes the skill takes a lot more than other ones. When I was hiring for the food bank, most of those jobs didn't matter what skills you had. It was all a people person thing. The skills didn't really matter. It was character and your values, and are you going to fit the company culture and organization? Are you going to be a team player versus somebody who just is in it just for themselves?
One of the blessings of this conversations, as I've had with other people smarter than me, I yourself and many others, Oak, is I'm learning.
I
I
think you're
mean,
going out on a limb there.
I'm just being real, but that's my feeling is with my son, I start monitoring his screen time. Start trying to teach him the importance of value. Give you an example. He wanted to go to a church and it was because of the water camp. Well, you might want to go to church for the other reasons. It's not the water camp. Those core things as he develops as a human being, those things you can't train, those things you can't teach, those things you look for. You mentioned open-ended questions. Is there any unique questions you ask to challenge a candidate that are worth considering?
The first thing I would ask, one of the first things I would ask is what are your key values that you live by? Because I want to know. And you get all kinds of values. I don't think there's a right answer and a wrong answer. I just want to hear if they've even thought about the values and why they're important to them. And then, and when they tell me a value, I'll ask them to explain it, to define it for me. Because values, I see this all the time. I go into a company or organization and I ask them if they got values, and they say, yeah, they're right there on the wall. And there's 5 words. I said, what's the definition of those? Well, everybody, we all know what they mean. I said, no, you don't. I said, one word means something to me, it means something different to you. I said, if you don't define that value, then you don't have company values. You have individuals who look at that word and decide what that means to them. That's the first thing that I always ask them, what's the number one value, and then define that for me so I understand where they're coming from. A couple other things that I like to ask is, what are your hobbies? They always look strange at me when I ask that question, but that kind of gives me an idea about somebody. If it's physical, or is it something that you do by yourself, or is it something that you do as a family or as a group? So I get a good feeling it, uh, about the person, not just somebody I'm going to hire that's going to be working for me, but as a
Right.
person. Because whether you like it or not, when you hire somebody, you're getting their personal life.
Yeah. Good
And that's
point.
part, I think that's part of I've heard it, the 80-20 rule, the 90-10 rule, whichever one you want to use, where you spend 90% of your time on 10% of the problem people, is because you didn't do a good job of vetting somebody to see if they are a good fit. Now, I got it. Life happens. And somebody that
Right.
was a perfect fit, something in their life happens and it changes their attitude, their
Right.
work ethic, those kind. I got that. That happens every once in a while. But I think more times than not, we don't do a good job of vetting people to see if they're going to be a good fit. We just
Mm.
fill a position because his resume said that he was good at that job. It's more than just that job, what you're hiring them for.
What are some answers you've heard that you were, that was a very impressive answer? And then maybe whether it was their hobby or how they answer values, maybe we can kind of peel that onion.
Answer for hobbies were outdoor things, kayaking, machine, playing a sport as an adult, playing a softball league or a men or women's basketball or volleyball. My daughter plays volleyball. To me, the values, number one is integrity. Whether you're a leader or you're a worker, I need to know that you are honest and going to tell the truth and you're going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. The other one, and when somebody asks me that question, I always say integrity number one. I said, but very, very close second, because without this one, number one doesn't really matter, is personal courage. Because if you don't have personal courage to stand up against something that goes against your values, then you're going to take the easy way out. And if you don't have personal courage to stand up against somebody, you're going to violate your own value.
I first got into the training professional development world, I heard integrity is the ability to do what you say you're going to do. Character, this is how I heard it from this friend. Tell me if this was relatable, is to keep doing that whether someone's looking or not. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Is that a definition that would align with you? Or would you say, and this too, to that?
I think integrity and character are very closely tied together. Character isn't a value, but it's very close to it, ties into all those values that are important. And I look at it this way: integrity is what you do, character is who you are.
Okay, I like that. Good
So
frame.
you're honest, you're hardworking, you do the right things. The character is what makes you do the right things. It's what that's who I always heard it said, the character of a person is who they are when the lights off or when
Okay,
nobody's watching.
I like that.
So the character is who you are. The values are the things you do, and good character will make you do the good things the values that you hold dear.
I remember in our last podcast together, you had talked about how there was that one guy that brought into the office, and he said, "Oak, what are you doing? Are you still, you're still here?" And he's like, "You have anything to do? Well, go home." And he gave you that time back. And I remember when I was editing that episode, reflecting on that. That's a moment that you can't always write on paper. There's movies and books and all that, but it's super hard to do that. So if I gave you a blank canvas, you could do whatever you want with it. You can put anything you want on it to create some ideal team members. Let's paint the brush into what are those? Here's the red paint. These are the things we have to stop doing. Here's the yellow paint. Let's proceed this with caution. Here's the green paint. Do these 100% all in. Let's start with the red paint.
red paint is at micromanaging.
Right.
We got to get people away from micromanaging. It is evil. It really is. Nobody likes to be micromanaged. And it stifles all creativity because why would I stick my neck out and come up with ideas of my own? All I got to do is sit there and wait for you to tell me what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And then if something goes wrong, it's not my fault. It's your fault. You told me what to do and how to do it and when to do it. So
Yeah.
what? No creativity happens there. I think that the yellow, I would say, is probably, and I'm a huge believer in servant leadership, but I think you got to be careful not to cross the line into allowing. You have to understand what servant leadership means, and it doesn't mean you
Right.
let people do whatever they want to do. Being a servant leader means you're going to make people do things they don't want to do because it's in their best interest, whether they know that or not. So I think that yellow, you got to understand where that line is, servant leadership, because I think it is the best way to lead, taking care of and taking care of people. And then the green, and without any doubt in my mind, is empower people. That's what makes great employees. That's what makes better people, is empowering them. Give them the authority to make decisions. Push their envelope a little bit. Assign them a job that maybe that isn't in their comfort zone, but you know they can do it. And then assign it to them, give them the authority, give them a good, this is what I want it to look like at the end. Here's your left and right limits. Lay it out for them, but then let them do it. And when I've done that on occasion, I always have somebody will run into an obstacle. That happens.
Right.
And they'll come to me and say, hey, sir, I just can't figure this out. What do I need to do? And I said, no, I'm not telling you what you need to do. Here's 3 ways I've seen it done. You figure out what works for you and what fits your character and your abilities. And then I'm here to give you some resources to answer questions. But this is you. This is your baby. You make it happen. And micromanaging stifles creativity, empowering people creates creativity. That's where it thrives because you're allowing people to make decisions and to do things with their own skills, their own knowledge, their own abilities. So that's where you're going to get the creativity. And that's what, for many years in this country, that's what drove this country, was the creativity of the workers. And I don't see a whole lot of it anymore.
Is that because you think it's ChatGPT taking over now, or the technology that's stifling creativity? Why do you think it's not happening anymore, if I may ask?
Because I see a lot more of micromanaging because
Okay, that's what you're referring to. Okay.
leaders are afraid that if they empower somebody to allow them to make decisions and do things without them telling exactly what to do, they're going to make a mistake that's going to affect their promotion or their pay raise. And look, if you empower people and you allow them to make decisions, they are going to make mistakes. I promise you, that's going to happen. We all do. None of us are perfect. I keep trying to convince my wife I am, but she's not buying it. None of us are. We're all going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Learn from those mistakes, but you got to allow those mistakes to happen. And I don't see that happening right now. I see a lot of more micromanaging, even in the military. I see a lot more micromanaging than I did when I was a young lieutenant.
Oh, really? Interesting. You said there's more micromanaging from your personal perspective, not that this is always the case, but you're seeing that from your
Yeah.
perspective, if I may peel that onion with you,
Right.
which is really interesting to hear, only because I guess I've always had this, and I've never been in the military, just being real. I guess I've always had this movie visual of the military. You remember the old movie G.I. Jane with Demi Moore? And she's
Yeah.
trying those scenes where Demi Moore's like painting, she's like that and like discipline to get better and like punch a wall or whatever. I haven't seen the movie in a long time. That's always been my frame. So it's really interesting you say that. What are you seeing? Let's talk about that if that's fair. And what do we need to go back to? Let's get back to some fundamentals because this is just pulling us away from being have more creativity.
When I was a young lieutenant, I was allowed to make decisions without going to my boss and asking permission. And this is the analogy that the story I always tell. Worked all over the world. I've been in 45 countries on 5 continents, working with foreign militaries over the years. And I actually had a colonel one day, and he was in Eastern European country. I'm not sure which one it was, whether it was Poland or the Czech Republic or somewhere, but it was an Eastern European country. And this full bird colonel asked me, he said, So what is it that makes the American military so much better than most other militaries? And I said, well, there's three reasons. In my opinion, and it's just my opinion, I said there's three reasons. Number one, we got the coolest toys in the world. We get to play with some really amazing equipment that other countries can only dream about having. I said, number two is that we train harder and more realistic than most other countries train. I mean, we train as close to combat as it, at least we used to. I don't know anymore. I've been out of the Army long enough that I'm away from it, but we used to. When I was a lieutenant, I mean, it was as close to combat as you could go. And then number three, and in my opinion, the most important factor is that we empowered people at the lowest levels to make decisions. In our Army, sergeants were making decisions that in other armies, colonels and generals made those decisions. And those sergeants and lieutenants and captains always had to go to that colonel or that general and get permission. I never had to get permission when I was making a decision. Most of the people I worked for said, "Oh, this is your baby. This is your project. You do it. If you got questions, come see me. But otherwise, I trust you." And they didn't wash their hands of it. Every week or two, I'd have to come in and give them a back brief. This is where
Yeah.
I'm at. This is what I've done. Yeah, absolutely. But they didn't interfere with me, and they didn't require me to come ask permission every time I needed to make a decision.
What was a time frame, if you don't mind asking? Was that like what time frame when this was going on? Was that in the
Yeah.
70s, 80s?
So I came in on active duty in 1986, and I retired in 2009. And by the time I retired in 2009 as a lieutenant colonel, I had two bosses. One, I was a lieutenant colonel that back to back. The one boss never had to ask permission to do anything. I told him what I wanted to do, and he'd say, go make it happen. The next boss I had, he wanted to make all the decisions. I don't care what it was. If you wanted to do something, you had to go to him first and explain what you wanted to do, and then he would decide whether or not you could do it or not. The last 4 or 5 years of my career in the Army, I saw where people were moving toward the micromanaging end. And I think part of it is because the Army was getting smaller. We weren't promoting as many people, and they were afraid they were not going to get their promotion. And to me, if that's what you're worried about as a leader, go do something else, please, because you're not going to be a good one.
It's funny we talk about this because me personally, I have I don't like to say victim. I hate that word, but I feel like that's the best word I can think of right now. So I hope this doesn't irritate you in any way, shape, or form. I feel I have been the victim of micromanagement. I recall I was doing a training once virtually, and I remember the camera was glitching. Quickly fixed it, and I got reamed for an hour, just an hour, by a manager, just totally obliterated because of that. And I remember thinking, I don't want to say anything. I remember internally here, just thinking. And when I went through that and went through all this therapy, it doesn't really matter. I had to go back to the book Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. I had to get back to those roots. And I remember reading that suffering's relative to the situation. There's the one thing in that book that always stood out to me. So I understand where you're coming from. People need to be empowered, trust your team, give them that. And I agree with you. We are getting away from that. And it is gross. And we need to get back to fundamentals as you're speaking to today. Where I have sometimes struggled with is the law of familiarity, letting people get too familiar with me. And then I feel sometimes I get taken advantage of them. I've had that other side, like if we're looking at it from that frame. So, in picking the right candidate, you go through the process, you find a winner. Where's the balance you feel in terms of a law of familiarity?
Yeah.
What's too much to share? I've had some managers tell me about too much about themselves. I'm sure you've had
Yeah.
situations like that too. Let's talk about that and say, where's the balance there?
That's a great question. And I get asked that all the time because I'm a firm
Yeah,
believer that you have to get to know the people you have the privilege to lead. And it is a privilege to be the
right.
leader. I think too many leaders today have forgotten that, unfortunately. But because that's how you build trust. You get to know them, they get to know you, because we're human. We don't trust people that we don't know. You got to have that balance where you get to know people and let them get to know you. And one of the things that I always tell people, that I told every one of those 600 lieutenants that I commission, is that your goal every day should be able to go out into your organization, find one person and find one new thing about that person. Not about work, about their personal life. What's their spouse's name? What's their kid's name? What sports do their kids play? What's their hobbies? What do they like? What don't they like? Now, the flip side of that is if you're going to ask that question, then you got to be willing to answer that question. And I don't think
Yeah.
any of that is so personal that they think you're their best friend now. You're just trying to get to know them, and you're letting them get to know you a little bit, so you start to build that trust. I hand out a little card that has my 10 rules for especially young leaders. And one of the first ones is get out from behind your desk. Get out and talk to the people that you have the privilege to lead, where they work. Because I promise you, you call somebody into your office as a leader and you ask them a question, you will get an entirely different answer than if you ask that question down where they're working. Because when you call them into the office, it's getting sent to the principal's office. They wonder, what did I do? What trouble am I in? They're automatically on a defensive. Whereas if you're out walking around and you ask them that same question, they're comfortable. They're where they work. You're in their environment. They're not in yours. And I had a boss who retired a 3-star general who was a very good mentor of mine that I trusted a lot. And he told me, Oak, he said, never, ever, ever turn down a chance to go get your own cup of coffee. He said, I don't care how high up in the organization you go get your own cup of coffee. He said, two things happen when you do that. Number one is that you show everybody that's working for you that you are no better than they are. You got to go get your own cup of coffee, just like they do. And number two, he said, if you're lucky, you got 2 or 3 different ways to get to the coffee pot and back to your office. And you stop and you talk along the way to the people that you are leading. And he said, that's how you build trust. Those are the things. You show them you're no better than they are, and you take an interest in them as a person, not just as an employee, but as a person. One of the problems I see, especially with young leaders, is that they want to help people that work for them. And somebody will come to them with a problem. And rather than help them solve that problem, they take the problem on their own as
Yep.
their own problem now. And that is one of the worst things you can do, because number one, you're probably not going to solve it, at least not the way they would like it to be solved. So now you just made them mad. Number two, I think, is that you aren't helping them figure out how to solve problems. And that's part of growing up. That's part of being a human, an adult, is you got to figure out how to solve your problems. Help them, give them resources, send them to the right people to talk to. I had soldiers at times that would come to me with problems that was way out of my league. I knew I had no training or ability to help that soldier. I'd say, let's go talk to the chaplain, or let's go talk to the sergeant major, or whoever I thought was the best one that might have some insight into helping them. So I didn't wash
Yeah.
my hands of it. I just
Yeah.
helped guide them to the right person that could help them the best.
I think it's important what you said, that their problems have become your problems and you show them. And the goal, in my opinion, is to show them how to find the answer so that they just do it on their own. Because unfortunately, this is what a lot of people managers want, is they want someone to be able to do it on their own and not call them. I hate to say it that way, but I think that's a key thing. I personally feel at times I make the mistake of caring too much. And I also have been at times, because I've had through micromanaging experiences. And the thing that reminds me in talking to you, Oak, is I need to do a better job at asking one thing about that person. Because I think for me, I think this is a problem a lot of people have, is they bring their personal baggage to work and assume the worst based on it. This is just maybe going a little too deep, but that's just my opinion. And I think what people need to do is they need to grow up, leave it at the doorstep,
Yeah.
and they need to put people first and but fund that creativity. Because my prediction is, with ChatGPT 5 coming out, I think yesterday, and all that taking precedence, we're going to lose the ability to just be creative, period.
Yeah.
Is there any habits you're doing now to still keep that creativity for Oak that people should emulate or people could emulate and be better leaders?
Yeah, well, let's go back to the other one first, because I think that one of the keys to getting to know the people, a little bit about them as a person, not just as an employee, is that w- we all bring personal stuff to the office. Some people are better at pushing it away, but how are you going to know if somebody who's one of your star employees start to drop a little bit? Maybe now they're only giving you about 75% of what you think they're capable of. If you get to know them a little bit, maybe you'll know the reason why. Maybe it's something at home. Maybe it's illness in the family, whatever. But the only way
Yeah.
you're going to get to figure that out is to get to know them a little bit. So I think that's the key. And the other piece of that is, if I'm assigning tasks, projects to people, if I don't know you very well, I may
Mhm.
give you a job, a project that that isn't fitted for you at all. And the person sitting right
Yeah.
next to you, that might be the best project that they could ever wish for. But I don't know that because I don't know either of you. And I see that happen a lot too, that we give projects to people that probably not the right person to give it to, but they don't know
Good
their
point.
people, so they don't know. But going back to the creativity part, the last question you asked, I think there are things that you can do to help keep that burning in you. I try to read something every day, whether it's professional about leadership or success or whatever, or if it's just something personal that fishing or whatever it is that I want to do. But at least one thing every day. I try to read more than that, but at least one thing every day. I have developed some routines and habits that help keep me on the right track throughout my day, which makes me do some things that maybe I wouldn't do otherwise. Eating is one of those. I end my day and start my day and end my day the exact same way every day, no matter where I am in the world. And one of the last things that I do evening is I write in my journal. I keep a journal, and I've kept
Mm.
one for 52 years. That makes me stop and think of, what did I do today? It just makes me stop and think and be creative. And I do not use chat GTP or AI or any of that stuff. It is my personal journal that I use to do that. And I also, when I used to work outside my office, when I wasn't just working for myself, I kept a professional journal in my office during the day. So when I
Mm.
made a decision, I would write it down there. And then whatever happened from that decision, I would write that in. Interesting conversations that I had during the day, but just things to make you use your brain, to make you think through writing it down and putting it in a way that maybe someday could be useful to you or to somebody else.
You reminded me, I gotta stop typing on a computer. It's just the art of penmanship. I have just ugly handwriting. I think about
You can fix that.
yeah. I shouldn't be making excuses with you. I don't know if you've ever heard of this book, but going through this with my highlighter, I don't know if you've ever seen this before. This is
I've
it's a
seen it a
pretty
few times.
it's a pretty good book on leadership. I would recommend people buy this book, obviously. It's actually very good if you are traveling and you haven't picked up your leadership legacy, becoming the leader you. I have been going through taking notes, very good quotes in here. The one I highlighted was a true leader has the confidence to stand alone, the courage to make tough decisions, and the compassion to listen to the needs of others. He does not set out to be a leader, but becomes one of the equality of his actions and integrity of his intent. Douglas MacArthur.
Thank you for mentioning my book. And one of the things I always tell people about my book, like I don't even mention the word I don't even think the word theory is written in that book anywhere, because I don't talk about theory. I talk about everyday things that you can do to improve your leadership skills and ability and empower the people you have the privilege to lead. So I really appreciate that. I'm retired. I probably work harder now than I did when I was working, and that's okay. I don't mind that at all. I love what I'm doing right now. It's my passion to get out and talk to as many people as I can. I'm always looking to give a talk to an association or a company, or do a leadership development program. I just started doing those for companies. I've got a couple models. I got a 3-day seminar, and I got a year-long program that they could pick from. I look at it as my responsibility to hand back some of this knowledge I've learned over the last 40 years as a leader. I don't have to do this. I love to fish. I'm here in Daytona Beach, Florida. I'm looking out at the Intercoastal Waterway. I have my yacht, my 17-foot John boat. I can go out and fish every day. In fact, my fishing buddy said, "Oh, what are you doing?" He said, "Why are you flying all over the world talking?" He said, "Just retire completely and fish." I said, "I can't. I look at it as my responsibility to do this." My call to action, and I try to end every one of my keynote talks with this, is that you, as a leader or as a person, not just a leader, every person on this planet, one of your goals every day should be to go out and make one positive difference in one person's life. Just one. Go out every day and make a positive difference in at least one person's life. You're going to make a difference in somebody's life every day. Why not make a conscious decision to make it a positive difference? Imagine how much better our families, our neighborhood, our community, our cities, our state, our country, the world would be if everybody went out and made one positive difference in one person's life every day.